Okay, let me see. Understanding fiction. So what do you want to call this? Understanding? No, not understanding fiction. Difference between. No, we can't say. Maybe understanding fiction. Yeah, yeah, because it's understanding. Remember you said if you can't understand what they're saying. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's on with Marquez and Buller.
Welcome to Marchese and Buller, and today we're going to talk about understanding fiction. If you can't understand fiction or what the writer's talking about, what is the use? And Gary was the one that brought this to our attention because it always goes back to the mainstream and the literary fiction where there's so many ways to write. People try to be as clear as possible. Artists get carried away at times when they try to add a flair to their work by making it obscurely written, by adding words that are supposed to represent things in life but mean something totally different. They call this literary, right? It's like an art form. And it's fine. There's always a place for everything. But then you have the mainstream fiction that reads more like a movie inside your head. We go into show, don't tell, but these stories are still presenting a movie-like experience as you read the story and the scenes play out in your mind. The movie style of writing started way back. I don't actually remember I remember there was a point where people started writing scenes and instead of sort of memoirs and you know. But once that happened, it was an explosion, and everybody can enjoy reading fiction. Is there a place for literary fiction? Yes, I feel there is. But if you're interested in making money, mainstream is probably the better avenue to go. I mean, think about it. Mainstream doesn't mean it's any less of an art form. You still have to put the scenes together and make them make sense. It still has to strike a chord with the reader. Like, think of making movies. Just because you're making a movie doesn't mean it's any less relevant, because it has to appeal to the masses, right? You want everybody to read your thing. Everybody. You want, no matter who they are, what they are, you want them to enjoy your fiction. People read to see a problem, a conflict, and then to see that conflict overcome. And the mainstream way of writing is an art form as well, but it appeals to the masses. What do you think, Gary?
So many things pass through my mind as you were saying that. Some things I agree with and some things I disagree with. I suppose I better start with why I came up with this idea. I'd purchased a collection of literary fiction on Audible, and I was listening to the first story on it, and it started off and it had me hooked. It was a story like a mountain climbing story. I don't want to name the collection or the editor because I just don't think it's fair, but she's a very well-known editor, very famous, and a very well-known collection. The first story was a mountain climbing story, and it sort of had me hooked. And about 2/3 of the way through, I found myself sort of wondering what was happening and what was going on. And by the end, I was like, you know, when you're like, what the F just happened there? You know, I didn't have a clue what happened in this story. And I'm not bigging myself up in any way, but I'm a writer. I write, I read quite a lot. And I felt a bit stupid going online and asking if, one, anyone had read the same story, and two, if they understood it. And I kind of think that sometimes with literary fiction, and I'm not ganging up on literary fiction, I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, there's a place for it. And I sometimes really enjoy it. There are certain experiences that I have had with literary fiction where I thought, oh, that's actually quite interesting. It gives you another viewpoint on things. So I'm not hating on it at all, but I kind of think sometimes with literary fiction, writers perceive themselves as being quite intelligent people. When you're reading a piece of work and you don't fully understand it, it's very difficult for you to come out and go, put your hand up and go, actually, I didn't really understand that. I didn't get it. And I was thinking at the time when I read it, I didn't understand it, and I felt stupid coming out and saying I didn't understand it. The only way I could find out about it was sort of Googling it, and as I did with Us a little bit at the end, I understood Us, the movie, but there's an element of it that I didn't get, so I had to Google that as well. But yeah, so I Googled it, and I'm thinking to myself, well, the whole idea of being a good, effective author is to write in a way that conveys your idea to the masses, for everyone to understand. And the problem with some literary fiction, particularly short stories, is it's not for the masses. Yeah, it's quite a snobby art form sometimes. Literary fiction is recognised by the elite in writing, basically. All the big magazines do it. And this is where I kind of disagree with you a little bit, in that I think if you're a short story writer like I am at the moment, the money is in literary fiction in terms of all the pro-rate magazines, or at least a lot of them, are literary magazines. Some of the best paid horror magazines out there print literary fiction, and the only exception to an extent, and even that does literary, is Cemetery Dance.
Do you think Now, you said that, okay, so just because short stories tend to lean more toward literary fiction, does that mean that the money is there? Because even though you're getting paid for those, it's not something that you usually do over and over. It's more for accolades, monetary, pretty much. It's mostly for like awards and
nebulas and Stokers and all that. Yeah.
A lot of the people who are up there, mostly they already have money. They're just doing it for the claim.
But if you crack that style of writing, and some writers have, I could spin 4 or 5 off the top of my head that have just cracked it, then, making $400 a story is pretty good going, especially if you get like 1 a month published. In terms of the short story side of it, yeah, the money's there. But like I said, I've discussed this with Will in the past and stuff. The analogy I used was, if you're listening to a short story like that, a literary short story, and you then have to go back and either reread it or Google it, then it's a little bit like when a comedian tells a joke and then you don't get the joke and then the comedian has to explain the joke. It sort of defeats the objective a little bit. Once you explain the joke, it's no longer funny. And once I have to Google a piece of horror fiction, it's no longer scary. A lot of literary fiction depends on the projection of an idea as opposed to something that's actually scary. Some of them are really random, like there's a lot of bird imagery in literary fiction, and there's a lot of horror around stuff that's not normally scary, like dancing, that mountain climbing thing, horror. I mean, I can see the horror in mountain climbing, but the kicker to it was nothing to do with the mountain climbing. It was more to do with the relationship between the narrator and his boyfriend at the end. So it was like, to go back and read it again, it makes it less scary. If you don't get the point of the story, then it's not scary. Some of the best horror experience I've had, usually with mainstream fiction, is when there's this dawning realization and you're going, oh my god, that is really clever. It happened to me one time when I listened to that Hammer House of Horror collection, and there was a story in there that the box and the ending was so clever, and it was so anyone could have understood it. My dad, who is not a reader, could have listened to it and fully understood the story. And the twist at the end would be no more deadened by your intellect or how clever you are. And I'm kind of intrigued to know what Will thinks about this, and also I'm kind of intrigued to know what people think about it, because I posted this on Twitter a while ago, a little bit about what we're talking about today, and I actually had a couple of direct messages off a couple of different writers saying they agreed with me on what I was saying, but they were kind of scared to put it out on Twitter because they didn't want to be shouted down by these, shunned by people, because they were saying, we don't get stories sometimes either.
What I think is, there's literary, there's mainstream. Literary, mostly your peers are reading it. Mainstream readers are reading it, and readers are not going to really go for literary fiction. There are some that do, don't get me wrong. I mean, I can feel people going, yes, there are. Yeah, there are some that do, but for the most part, you're going to get the bulk of readers, actual content consumers, going for mainstream fiction because it's more entertaining, it appeals to the masses.
It's a little bit like, is it the Oscar? There's the Oscars and there's another movie awards. And one of them's the Oscars, obviously decided by a panel. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's another movie award.
And I think the other one's the Academy or something, or
there's a different one, and that's actually voted by the cinema-going public.
Your Avengers or Marvel movies can actually get some awards.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit like that. Literary fiction is like the equivalent of the Oscars, say, and mainstream fiction, just standard horror or whatever, standard genre fiction, is the other one. So it's no less of an achievement to be recognised by your peers than it is to be voted, I suppose, but they both kind of carry weight. I don't get it. If you write a story and your reader doesn't get your story on the first read or the first listen, and they're sort of scratching their head at the end of it going, well, what was that about? Then you've not done your job, surely. Or am I just being harsh? Maybe there are people out there that are generally not going to get it, and you can't account for intelligence and stuff. But
then you're just focusing on that one demographic, and then that's not good because you're not going to sell it to everybody. So, what Gary said, going back to figure something out is not a good thing because sometimes it can ruin the experience for you. But what about when you go back and you find something horrifying? There's that too. But we want to know what you think. Gary wants to know.
I want to know. I'm genuinely interested in this. I mean, you might not want to say, maybe, because you're scared of being, you know, the writing community coming down on you because, you know, I didn't understand the story, you know, and it's like, but yep, I've had messages of people saying they agree with me, thumbs up sort of thing. I've hit the nail on the head with it. Why is literary fiction so well paid? Why, you know, why do they write about themes that aren't particularly scary on the face of it, like about flowers and about birds and about... I can pick up a dark mood in there, but I'm not kind of sure why it's scary. Please explain to us why. I'm me and Will completely missing the point. Yeah.
No, and I definitely, I like Leo Robertson because he actually says what he wants. Yeah. Even though, and he said it in some of his blogs and some of his posts, he said, you know, it's probably not something that's popular among people, but I'm going to say it anyway because, you know, you have to be honest. You can't lie to yourself. But no.
We'll see you next time. Yeah.
It's all with my Casey and Buller. It's all with my Casey and Buller.
On 2 pictures. Okay, what was the thing here? Let me just pull this up. Okay.
You've got a monologue about this? You got?
It's any less, you know...
relevant, yeah.
Relevant. You know, it's funny because I look at the analytics and it shows the click-through rate and it shows like how much YouTube shows your stuff, your thumbnails, and then it shows how many people click on it. And it's actually people clicking on it from the pictures because they see these crazy pictures and they want to see what's going on, you know.
Nice. That's good.
So it's true what they say. You know, you got to get those crazy. There's a you know, the formula to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the mainstream way of writing is an art. Start this. Maybe that'll be the picture in the background and just your tongue, and then me and you just going. You got to move a little bit more. Wait, move a little more to the. There you go. So, a little more to your right. A little more. Yeah, right there. Perfect. A little more to your left, just a tiny tad. There you go. Excellent. Okay, and mine will be like... Okay. Oh boy.
Writers perceive themselves as being quite intelligent people, you know, and good old me monologue, by the way. But so many things pass through my mind.
Okay, cut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to go to the "we want to know what you think" part. Okay.
Okay.